Johnny Phillips with Junior Achievement in New Jersey, where we prepare students to succeed in the global economy.
Hi there, my name is Peter Smithy. I'm a Senior Audit Specialist at Merck, and I've been at Merck for about a year and a half now. Nice
Nice.
to be here.
Peter, thank you for taking the time to speak with me, share some insight for our students. To start, so you said you've been at Merck for a year now. Would you mind describing your job story? Meaning any jobs you've had in the past. You can start with your first job and maybe how you ended up in your position now at Merck.
Sure, yeah. So the professional career, I think, is a journey, and I started off as a waiter at California Pizza Kitchen in college,
Nice.
and then got my undergraduate degree in environmental science. So it's kind of like a bio degree.
Yeah.
Didn't want to be in the lab forever and decided that I wanted to go into the private sector. So not working for the government, but also not working for an education institution anymore. I know some of y'all can relate to that. Probably don't want to stay in school forever. It's a long time.
Yeah.
So I ended up working in environmental consulting for 5 years or so. So I worked in telecom consulting. We went out to the cell sites and inspected them all around the country as they were upgrading. So it was an interesting role in that it was geographically very wide
Mm.
and exposed me to lots of new processes, but got a little tired of that after 5 years and wanted to keep growing, try something new. And I went back to get my business degree at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. So I graduated from CMU, last May, so May of 2019, and then began at Merck in July. So my first role was actually not in audit. I was in research labs finance, and we look at all the different things our research compounds or research programs are doing, like
Mhm.
our coronavirus vaccine and how that's doing, how much spend they're you know incurring, and then rolling that up and talking to investors about that and our management. So in audit now, totally different role.
Yeah.
We if you haven't watched any other videos yet, we work on small engagements about a month long with a team of 2 to 5 people
Mhm.
to inspect the risk of each particular part of the business. So whether it's packing vaccines in a place down in Pennsylvania or tabulating payments in Costa Rica, we look at it also.
Yeah. That's interesting. And you mentioned one, trying something new, stepping out of the field that you were in to start with. Um, but two, kind of learning and using different skills from your time in the environment in the research labs to communicate with business personnel. So I was wondering if you were willing to elaborate on those skills you learned. Going through school, studying environmental science and environmental policy, but also that time in the research lab. What did you learn from that, and how do you feel you can use that? I'm now working in the private sector.
That's a good question. I think one tends to focus on their skills that they need early on. And it's challenging in the environmental science space where you tend to have really hardcore skills in science, like being able to diagram a cell, but how does that actually translate into a job?
Yeah.
And it was a little bit of a confusing sell to try to figure out what I wanted to do in my professional career. But I think the resounding skill for me really was the ability to translate complex processes to people that didn't really know a lot about them or didn't care about them to
Mm.
begin with. So imagine trying to explain how what I was working on, how a lake system gets polluted by people dumping fertilizer on their lawns, and
Hmm.
explaining how that affects their home property value. You can relate to the fact you don't want to be diving into the water with gross algae in there,
Yeah.
and so your property value is going to go down. That's kind of the simplified version of the science that underlies what I was working on. So I didn't end up working in the lake ecosystem health and obviously later in my career, but that ability to talk about things and explain how each part of component was put together translated well to the telecom sector, and then again in the audit department now and looking at totally new processes every month and trying to read what's going on and be able to assess them anew.
Mm. So being able to kind of, I don't know if you're going to elaborate a little bit more.
No, yeah, yeah. So that's the basic part of it. I mean, obviously, there's all the things you might read on a job description too. So,
Yeah.
the Word, PowerPoint, Excel, data analytics, those sort of things become more important. And I'm starting to feel a little old because the iPhone came out when I was in high school.
Yeah.
So I've seen the transformation that working mobily has had, and thank goodness this pandemic has happened now as opposed to 10 years ago when we all have a decent amount of computing power and internet speed at home. Not everyone, and it's definitely an inequality we see in society, but um, that ability to work on the go and be adaptable and flexible. But I can talk to more specific skills if you like, but I think that's one that jumps out right away.
No, that covers it. That's something that's really relatable and something that's needed in all fields, right? Being able to digest information and then give it to somebody who, like you said, doesn't understand it or doesn't care in the first place. So now you have to persuade them to listen to what you're saying. So I think that's very valuable, and thank you for sharing that. And we're getting to understand that you have a very deep science background and an interest in science. And you mentioned COVID a couple times, and I kind of want to get your feedback on, what you think about COVID-19 and what we're going through in terms of the pandemic and a vaccine, just from a personal standpoint.
It's a big disruption. I mean, it sounds like it pales in comparison, epidemiologically speaking, that is scientifically,
Hmm.
compared to the 1918 flu, and certainly to the plague in the 1300s, where 50% of the population died. So I do want to put it in perspective that we're somewhat fortunate and also unprepared, as is obvious. And it's taken a huge toll. And people like me have now lived through, in my working career, almost working career, two economic crises, and that's been a huge toll. So if you're incurring student debt, you might feel like you're in a trap. So it depends on your life stage for sure. But that economic toll is real and disparate across, or it differs across different populations.
Hmm.
Um, at Merck, we've been very lucky. We've really had no reason or need to lay off any folks. We've transitioned to a totally digital world where the people are going into the office to help prepare our vaccines, our production line, conduct critical science. But people like me in finance don't need to be there.
Yeah.
I work remotely around the world, so I have to get up early, which is a pain, but then I'm jet lagged. So I try to look at both sides of the coin
Mm.
and look at how this pandemic has influenced and changed our ways of working. Or, I mean, look at what we're doing right now. We would have the ability to disseminate this across more people than just the few dozen that are able to pack into a room.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so yeah, those are some of the things I think about. And in terms of the vaccine, I mean, this stage, I don't want to record something and then say we're going to be successful or not. And certainly the world will be successful. And I can't imagine being able to do our normal audit work where we're flying to and from a country every month,
Hmm.
that being realistically starting up again anytime soon, just because, yes, we might have a vaccine, but how is that going to be? I think about implementation and operations a lot, and that was one of my focuses besides finance at business school. Was okay. Well, if I fly to, let's say, Turkey, and I took that new Pfizer vaccine, which is in the news, does Turkey recognize that? Are they going to make me quarantine? Are they going to hold me there? We had people stuck in countries, so there's a lot of logistical challenges that will be um, surfaced by this pandemic. So that's something I think about pretty regularly in terms of getting back to a more normal lifestyle.
Hmm. Sound like we have to start adopting a new normal and getting comfortable with this. But thank you for sharing, right? The economic impact on different, communities and populations of people, the personal impact on your daily routine and, what it is that you have to do on a day to day. There's a lot of people, we're all can relate to that feedback and that insight. So thank you for giving that piece. It sounds like you've, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but stuck on a track with your interests and, what you wanted to do in school and how you sought out your occupation. But if you can go back and give advice to your younger self, what do you think you would say? And, if you feel like you needed advice back then.
Yeah, I would say be a little bit more, I mean, for me at least, be a little bit more deliberate about my career planning. I have to be honest, I was wallowing around and
Hmm.
looking at applying for one job here and there. It was a very different world for me applying out of undergrad as it was applying in business school. Business school was get in and immediately start focusing on jobs.
Yeah.
Whereas I think when in a 4 year college like I went to, it was do well in class and hope that that degree will get you a job,
Hmm.
which isn't really a great way to proceed in school. That being said, you're in a growth part of your life in college, and you should explore new careers. I didn't go in thinking I was going to be an environmental science major, but I really liked this mapping class, and I do try to come in with some idea of what I'd like to do, but also have some flexibility along the way. And people have different tolerances for that in their life. I mean, I have a friend from when I was 10, he wanted to be a pilot, and 20 years later, he flies for American Airlines now, and he's done nothing else.
Yeah.
And that's just not me.
Mm.
I obviously have chose multidisciplinary things, and some people, I mean, someday I kind of feel like opening a restaurant, but I'm not that crazy where I'll do that either. But um, be deliberate and organized with what your search looks like, and network a little bit more. I think it's not it's not a bad thing. Networking might have a bad connotation, but I talk to kids that are younger than me, to people that are older, practically to our executive committee. If you demonstrate a willingness to learn and a genuine interest in what people are doing, you might not know everything about what they're doing, but you ask intelligent questions like, about the coronavirus vaccine. Are you working on that? No, I'm
Yeah.
not. I'm sitting here. I'm not in the lab, but I can talk to you about it if that's
Hmm.
of interest to you. And that helps build a personal connection so that when you do go to apply and you have a meaningful conversation and background to speak to when you're talking to the interviewer, even if I'm not in the room there with you.
Thank you for that. Right. So, being strategic about what you want to do, but also staying open to the point that, you can study something interdisciplinary and then find yourself doing something different. I think that is really important for today's young students to hear just because so many of what we're dealing with comes from, so many different places. You can't pinpoint one place to find a solution. So it helps. It's an advantage to, have a different understanding of different fields. That's really powerful. And thank you for sharing that. Well, Peter, I want to take some time again to thank you for sitting and talking with me and sharing the insight that you shared. You say your time is one of the most valuable things you can give. So from Junior Achievement, we really do appreciate you and looking forward to talking with you in the future.
My pleasure, Johnny. Pleasure chatting with you. Thanks.